We're here because free speech is under attack. We're here because people are being convinced that socialism works. We're here because people are being judged guilty until proven innocent. We are fighting back with facts. This is not a safe zone, so buckle up, Buttercup. This is the raw, naked truth. Welcome to the Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, and I am joined today by Wallet Watch contributor and CFP for Elliott Wealth Management, Chris Calandra. Chris, how you doing today?
Hey, Eric, I'm doing great. We live in a crazy world, but my family and I are very blessed, so life is good.
Yeah, there's an old Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times, and I think that curse has come true.
Yeah, way too interesting for my liking. Boring would be super, really super. I would love it if you had me on and you said, "What do you want to talk about?" I'd be like, "There's nothing going on," you know.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've had nothing to talk about.
Yes, yes, and I'm a big time geek, Eric, and I can't believe that as a certified financial planner speaking with clients, that I am literally talking about a war in Europe. It's
Yeah,
remarkable.
that's something we never thought we'd be talking about. We certainly never thought it would be affecting our finances.
This is
But
true.
we've all seen inflation going through the roof. Prices at the supermarket are ridiculous. Prices on energy are ridiculous. And of course, the Biden administration is trying to blame everything on Putin.
Yes. I do not believe that that is true. I can provide ample evidence that it's not true. Anyone can. It's easily refuted. But that is kind of politically what he's reduced to, because it doesn't seem like the administration has many answers. President Biden was asked a question, kind of like on the rope line recently, and could you do about gas prices? And he said, nothing.
Yeah,
So that's kind of amazing.
yeah, he
Uh,
literally said there's nothing we can do. And of course, both Democrats and Republicans responded to that with all sorts of ideas of things they could be doing.
this is very true. And granted, there's no silver bullet, like he could do one thing or one executive action and make this go away. To that extent, what he said is true. But I think that there are lots and lots of policy things that can be done to improve things, maybe not back to where they were before, but to try and help the American people and the American economy on this front. And I don't know if you saw this, Eric, but I found it pretty interesting that Larry Summers, who is a former Treasury official, longtime Democrat, teaches at Harvard. I think he was the president of Harvard for a time being, and was in the Obama administration, well-credentialed Democrat economist. He refuted what President Biden said, blaming inflation on Putin. Larry Summers said that that's a bad thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, he pointed out why it's not true, because we had inflation well before the Russia-Ukraine issue arrived on the scene. Certainly that's exaggerated the problem, but the problem existed beforehand. I know, Eric, in my practice, working with clients, we've been talking about inflation since April of last year. We were a little bit ahead of the curve. And so this is something that has been building for a while. It's been exaggerated by the Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. But going back to Larry Summers, he pointed out the reasons why it's not just Putin's fault. And he also pointed out, I think wisely, I think President Biden would be well served by heeding this advice, that it doesn't help your cause, because when you criticize, like the Biden administration is, the energy, saying they're price gouging, that's further going to dampen their willingness to do business and put their necks out there and increase supply when they feel that they don't have a friend in the administration. And that's what Larry Summers talked about. And I think he was spot on.
Yeah, he was. Oil industry executives have stated that one of the reasons they're not drilling more is because the Biden administration has essentially declared war on them and they don't know where it's going to go. So they don't want to start drilling only to be told in 2 months, oh, we're taking away your permits.
That's
So,
right.
they're very nervous about that. And in fact, economists, back when they were debating the American Rescue Plan, told the Biden administration that this was going to cause runaway inflation. And
Yes.
he just dismissed them. He said, no, it's not. And sure enough, now we're seeing it.
Yes, and more recently with the Build Back Better plan, which from my perspective, thankfully has been shelved, hopefully permanently. President Biden and his advocates were talking about spending even more money would fight inflation. And I don't think many people believed that, including Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Sinema, who were key in getting that legislation shelved. But left to his own devices, President Biden would have probably put more fuel on that fire, spending even more money, increasing borrowing, which would have enhanced inflation, in my opinion.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we've seen historically that increased government spending increases inflation. Increased spending in general, increases inflation. But when you're talking about government spending, especially now, you're talking about trillions, where in household spending, you're talking about a lot less.
Yes. And to your point about the rescue plan, is I saw some great research that talked about, I forget the exact numbers, but essentially there was a shortage from the economic slowdown from the pandemic and the shutdowns that occurred. There was a shortage, and then the government wanted to fill in that shortage, which kind of makes sense, Eric. How they did it, of course, we could quibble about, but they put in between 3 and 4 times what the shortfall was. So they put tons of money into the system at a time when supply chain was already stretched. Basic supply and demand economics. We added way more money into the system, increased the supply of dollars and money, and at the same time, we had less goods and services because of those same shutdowns and same difficulties on the supply chain. And voila, you're getting significant inflation. This is very predictable, very predictable. And now we have the consequences of that with Russia invading Ukraine. It makes the existing problem only that much worse.
Absolutely. And of course, there was talk that in order to combat inflation, the Fed is going to start raising interest rates. Any opinions on when they're going to start that? And I mean, I've heard folks talk about anything from 4 interest rate hikes all the way up to 8.
Yes. The Federal Reserve is in an incredibly difficult position. And I had shared that opinion on my podcast, the Simply Financial podcast, and on other shows as well, is that the Federal Reserve is in a difficult position. And this is separate from the Russia-Ukraine story, because they want and need to raise interest rates to fight inflation. Yet you have an administration that wants to put more money, more spending into the system, which could counteract what the Federal Reserve wants and needs to do with raising interest rates. You also have an economy that is strong, but raising interest rates can hurt that economic growth. And it's not like this economic growth is without its flaws. Now their situation is made even more difficult because historically, big spikes in energy prices like we're experiencing now, both before the Russia-Ukraine situation and after the Russia invasion of Ukraine, those types of energy spikes usually lead to a recession. So the Federal Reserve wants to fight inflation and raise interest rates. They want to work in cooperation with the administration, ideally. And now you're going to see, I believe, over the next couple of months, Eric, increased talk about the US economy slipping into recession. It may not happen. A lot has to be played out, but I think that's going to enter into the public dialogue before too long.
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, it's already started coming into the public dialogue. 2 months ago, if you watched the panel shows, you had maybe one expert saying we might go into a recession. Over the past 2 weeks, if you watch them, it's pretty much been unanimous. All the panelists, regardless of political bent, have said, yes, we expect to go into a recession later this year. So they're already ringing the alarms about that. And
Yes.
that's something that folks have to keep an eye out.
Yes, they do. And I think your average American have not been exposed to the recession kind of conversation just yet. But when they are exposed to it, I think in large measure, it'll resonate with them because they see the inflation. And I've said this to you in previous discussions, I think both on and off the air, Eric, is, there's lots of economic market kind of stuff that happens that Americans, they're not dumb by any stretch of the imagination, but it's outside of they just don't want to deal with it. They don't follow it that closely. It's an area of disinterest. It doesn't make sense to them. Inflation makes sense to them. It is very real when they go to the grocery store and they see the prices, and then they fill up their tank and they see the prices, and they see the valuation of their homes going up, and they see that they can't order furniture and have it delivered inside of 8 months. They see all of these things. It's very, very tangible. So I believe when they're introduced to the recession concept that's starting to make its way through the system, that it'll resonate with them. It'll make sense to them because they'll see, oh, you have all of these increasing prices. That's not healthy, and it could lead to a recession. They're going to buy it quite easily, which will be a problem for the country and for the administration, because if people kind of have negative sentiment and are nervous about the future, they will behave certain ways with their money that's not really too great in terms of the economy and the markets and the direction of the country as a whole. It's a big problem for President Biden, and he has lots of them on his plate already.
That's absolutely true. And that is the raw, naked truth. You can catch us as well as Simply Financial with Chris Calandra at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts. If you've got something you'd like us to look into on either podcast, you can reach us at xvadio.com/connect. We'll see you next time.